Donald Trump loses it after Jasmine Crockett unleashes a bombshell involving Melania, a political earthquake that instantly shakes the foundations of Washington and reverberates far beyond America's borders, not simply because Trump is known for his fiery temperament but because the nature of the bombshell strikes at the heart of his carefully guarded personal sphere, pulling Melania, who has always been seen as a reluctant yet graceful participant in Trump's political theater, into the center of the storm. And what makes the revelation even more potent is Jasmine Crockett's signature delivery, sharp, unrelenting, and infused with a confidence that makes her words feel less like speculation and more like undeniable fact, the kind of bombshell that cannot be ignored even by networks traditionally sympathetic to Trump, because Crockett, a Democratic firebrand, has established a reputation for exposing hypocrisy with surgical precision, and when she uttered her claim, it was as though she had aimed a spotlight into the shadows Trump has worked for years to obscure, leaving the former president visibly shaken, his face flushing, his voice rising, his gestures more erratic than usual, leading seasoned analysts to comment that they had rarely seen Trump so unsettled. And while his allies rushed to dismiss Crockett's statement as political theater, their defensiveness only fueled suspicion that there was truth buried beneath her words, and Melania's silence, as always, became the most discussed element of all, because her absence from Trump's side in recent months, her refusal to appear at campaign rallies, and her almost ghost-like presence in political discourse had already sparked rumors of discord, separation, or at the very least disinterest. So when Crockett hinted that Melania's knowledge or private stance on a critical matter might contradict Trump's public persona, it set off a wildfire of speculation, amplified by journalists hungry for scandal and commentators eager to interpret every glance, every timeline inconsistency, every whispered source, and Trump's meltdown, his pacing, his angry tweets, his late-night calls to confidants, was seen not just as the reaction of a man under attack but as a signal that this particular revelation had hit closer to home than usual, raising questions about whether Melania possessed knowledge or documents that could complicate Trump's ongoing legal troubles, or whether her personal opinions about his political comeback diverged so dramatically that Crockett's bombshell exposed a fissure he could no longer keep hidden. And as the hours stretched into days, the story consumed every major media outlet, transforming into not just a headline but a cultural obsession, with some seeing Crockett as a truth-teller holding Trump accountable, while others accused her of exploiting Melania's privacy for partisan gain. Yet regardless of perspective, one undeniable fact emerged. Trump's uncharacteristic loss of composure validated Crockett's power to destabilize him, something few politicians had managed to do so effectively, and as news panels debated the implications, psychologists weighed in on Trump's psychological state, body language experts dissected his press conference footage, and satirists crafted viral sketches mocking his frantic energy, all while Melania's silence became louder and louder, interpreted by some as quiet defiance, by others as dignified distance, and by still others as complicity through refusal to clarify, which only intensified the intrigue, making her a silent yet central character in the unfolding political opera where every unanswered question carried the weight of potential history. And Crockett herself seemed to relish the spotlight, not in a self-serving manner but in the way of someone convinced she had punctured a carefully maintained illusion, speaking in interviews with the same fiery determination, doubling down when critics attacked her credibility, and using her growing platform to argue that transparency is not optional when it comes to leaders who seek the highest offices in the land. And as she did so, Trump's rage only mounted, his public appearances increasingly combative, his language more erratic, his accusations against Crockett more personal, calling her names, questioning her intelligence, and framing her as part of a vast conspiracy designed to weaken his campaign. But the more he lashed out, the more it confirmed Crockett's impact, because the Trump who thrived on controlling the narrative suddenly looked like a man scrambling to contain damage that had slipped beyond his control. And even within his inner circle, whispers began to emerge about whether Melania's detachment could prove politically fatal, with aides anonymously speculating to reporters that her unwillingness to stand beside him was becoming impossible to ignore, further fueling Crockett's point. And as late-night television continued to parody the saga, memes flooded the internet, TikTok creators dissected every clip, and hashtags combining Melania's name with Crockett's revelation trended worldwide, creating an inescapable media storm that even Trump's most disciplined allies struggled to counter, because every attempt to dismiss the story only extended its life cycle, and journalists dug deeper into Melania's history, her rare interviews, her occasional comments about disliking politics, and her ambiguous facial expressions during Trump's rallies, connecting dots that may or may not exist but nevertheless painted a picture of a woman possibly alienated from her husband's ambitions, which aligned almost perfectly with Crockett's insinuation, making the narrative even stickier, while Trump's supporters, furious and defensive, staged rallies and flooded social media with counter-narratives, trying desperately to reframe Crockett as a liar. Yet their energy betrayed their own awareness that the story had captured the nation's imagination, and in the midst of it all, Crockett refused to retreat, instead delivering more pointed remarks in subsequent interviews, broadening her critique to include not just Trump but the culture of silence that enables powerful men to avoid accountability, which resonated deeply with audiences weary of scandal after scandal. And as more commentators weighed in, the broader question emerged: was this bombshell about Melania truly a revelation of fact, or was it a symbol, a narrative wedge that exposed Trump's greatest vulnerability, not his legal cases, not his financial scandals, but the possibility that those closest to him might not fully stand with him? And in the ruthless arena of politics, perception often matters more than proof, so whether Crockett's claim was substantiated or not, the damage was done, because Trump losing it became the story itself. His unhinged response replayed endlessly across television screens, each repetition eroding his image of unshakable dominance, until even conservative strategists quietly admitted that his fury had drawn more attention to the matter than Crockett alone ever could have, making this a textbook example of how overreaction can transform an accusation into a narrative too powerful to suppress. And as time went on, the saga morphed into something larger, no longer just about Crockett or Trump or Melania but about the dynamics of truth, power, and vulnerability in modern politics, a reminder that in the age of instantaneous media and relentless scrutiny, the strongest man can be undone not by policy defeats or electoral losses but by the unpredictable chaos unleashed when personal and political worlds collide under the relentless glare of the public eye.